Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. Miranda, smiling enigmatically, stroked the dress on the bed with her hand. Today is their wedding anniversary. Ethan invited her to a dinner, at which all their friends and even acquaintances would gather. Miranda asked not to plan such a celebration, but Ethan did what he wanted. Oh, that Ethan. He never listens to her. Or rather, he listens, but he does quite often, not as she asks. The door to the bedroom slammed. Miranda, still smiling, turned toward the door. Ethan walked in. He was wearing a strict black suit. Miranda raised her eyebrows in bewilderment. "Ethan, what is the matter? Why are you wearing that suit? It is not very appropriate for tonight. I thought you said you were going to wear the dark blue one. Did something happen?" Ethan didn't even smile. He was too serious. He walked into the room and stopped right in front of Miranda. Indifferently, he answered her. Exactly the right man for tonight. Miranda staring at him incomprehensibly. But her husband said nothing more. He just stood there, hanging his hands upright in front of her, staring at her, except that it seemed to her that he was looking right through her. There was a strange thoughtfulness on his face. Miranda decided not to argue with him. "All right, if that is what you want, stay in it. Except that my dress doesn't match your costume then. Maybe I'd better wear the white one." Ethan was silent, and then he said quietly, "No, there would be a lot of blood on it." "What blood? What do you mean? I don't understand you." "Ethan, there's nothing wrong with you." Miranda frowned. "This blood right here." Ethan turned his back on her, and Miranda could barely contain her scream. His back was a mess of blood and mangled flesh. It was all mixed up with pieces of torn black suit cloth. Blood dripped on the floor. In a few seconds, there was a puddle on the floor. Miranda looked at her husband's back with her mouth open. Then he turned and smiled at her again. Only the smile was so sinister and unnatural that a chill ran down Miranda's spine. She began to shake with horror. "Don't worry. I won't get you dirty. If you don't lean on me, we won't cuddle tonight. Just kiss. You want to kiss me, don't you? Honey, I think you do. How about we start right now?" He began to move closer to her. It was only now that Miranda saw that he had blood in his mouth too, a lot of blood, and it began to flow over his lips, down his chin and pouring onto the floor. And then the stream got stronger, and it started splashing on her. Miranda blinked and then looked at her hands. They were covered in blood. That's when Miranda was finally able to scream. She screamed in a frenzy. She just kept screaming and screaming. And then darkness fell over her, but she kept screaming so hard her ears rang. She thought she was going deaf from her screaming. She thought she heard a voice through her screaming, but she couldn't make it out. And suddenly, it was so bright that she squeezed her eyes shut for the first seconds. And then she heard the voice again. "Wake up, Lord, wake up. That's enough. That's enough." And Miranda realized whose voice it was. It was her son's voice. Miranda felt someone shaking her hard by the shoulders. She blinked several times and was suddenly silent. "Mother God, I was afraid I wasn't going to bring you to your senses. You've never acted like this before. It's bad for you to call a doctor." "Mom, please don't say anything. You scare me." Miranda looked at her son, trying to come to her senses. It was a dream. It was only a dream. A nightmare that had been keeping her awake for the last night. If she could get rid of it, if she could get it out of her head, if she could reprogram her mind, which could not calm down and come to terms with it. But she will never accept it. It's just not possible. And if it weren't for her son, she'd let herself go crazy. She would let her mind be in another dimension, where all is well, where there are no storms or sadness, where Ethan is always with her, and there is no place for nightmares and that awful heartbreaking pain. As always, after such nightmares, she began to cry. Now the tears began to roll down her cheeks, and as soon as Kevin saw them, he sighed and hugged his mother, holding her tightly to him. "That's it. You've calmed down. I can see it's all good. Mom, I'm here for you. Everything will be all right. You don't have to worry about yourself. Everything will be all right. Believe me, I promise you. Just a little while longer. Let a little more time pass. Miranda closed her eyes and pressed herself against her son and said in a trembling voice, I can't, Kevin. I have no strength. It hurts so much. Nothing helps. How much more time must pass? How long, Kevin? Kevin didn't answer because there was no definite answer. Some people needed a few months. Some needed years to get over it, to stop killing themselves. How would his mother be? He didn't know. He hugged his mother for about 10 minutes. Kevin swaying slightly from side to side, as if lulling her months ago. The therapist told him that this was a very effective way to calm the nervous system, and it was the way he had often soothed her mother when she was having those terrifying panic attacks, and now it had a favorable effect on her too. Mother stopped trembling and sobbing. Kevin pulled slightly away from his mother and looked into her face. Yes, she had calmed down. All is well, he asked softly. Miranda nodded. Yes, son, everything is all right now. You know, I think that's progress. I slept peacefully for almost a week, and the nightmares didn't bother me. I'm sure it'll get better. You just have to be patient. I need time, just a little more time. Kevin nodded. He kissed his mother on the cheek and said, Yeah, Mom, it'll take a little more time and it'll go away. You'll stop suffering so much. Miranda nodded too and tried to smile. You can go now. I'm going to take a pill now and go to sleep. You go, it's all right with me. Let me get you some water. I'll sit with you for a while. Miranda shook her head. No, I don't need it. I have water. There is no need for my son to sit. Go and rest. Kevin looked at his mother for a few seconds, then stroked her on the shoulder and left. Miranda was left alone. The smile immediately disappeared from her face. She sighed and closed her eyes, pressing her hands to her heart. She wasn't completely calmed down yet. She got up, took the pills from her table, squeezed one out of a blister. She drank it and lay back on the bed. For a few minutes she lay with her eyes closed, and then her hand moved to the other side, to where no one was on the bed. The accident 3 months ago had divided her life into before and after. That gruesome accident took her husband. Ethan died at the scene of the accident. And the creepiest part was that the accident happened in front of Miranda. That is why she has these nightmares. That's why she still can't come to her senses. Ethan died in front of her eyes. She was waiting for him outside a restaurant, their favorite restaurant, and he was crossing the street. They had made reservations at the restaurant to celebrate their wedding anniversary. And across the street from the restaurant was a large flower shop. He was carrying a large bouquet of flowers in his hands. Ethan was smiling and did not look around, and Miranda was not paying attention to anything. She, smiling, looked only at her husband. And then he was hit by a car. She still remembered how he flew upward and how roses scattered all over the road. And then he fell, covered in blood. And Miranda immediately ran to him. She was with him while he was still breathing. The ambulance drove so long, and he could barely breathe. He couldn't speak, but he moved his lips as he looked at her. Before she died, she heard only one word: love. Ethan loved her. He confessed his love for her. Even if he didn't love her, he would only stay alive. A year before, a chill had run between them. Miranda even thought her husband had fallen out of love with her. She thought they would divorce, so bad was their relationship. She endured 9 whole months of doubts, bad moves, hard thoughts, quarrels, and scandals. And then everything changed abruptly. He became affectionate and gentle with her again, and he tried to spend every spare minute with her. Miranda was resentful of him. She had heard too many hurtful words in those 9 months. But then she thawed out, and things got better between them. And this anniversary was special. They had reconciled. She felt loved and loved, and they were going to spend that special night, just the two of them, just him and her. And Ethan was dead. Miranda took it very hard. She didn't even want to remember how bad she felt. Miranda wanted to die. She really wanted to die, and she would have died if not for her son. Kevin was by his mother's side all the time. He was watching her to make sure she didn't do anything to herself. So he sought help from a therapist, and those few sessions helped her. She was prescribed special pills. The nightmares that had previously plagued her every night began to bother her less. Now she had nightmares once a week, and as the doctor said, they would soon wane. Miranda fumbled with her hand over the bed, where her husband used to sleep on their beloved dear bed. Now there was no one here but her, and there never would be again. Miranda would love no one else, and no one would lie here with her. At 45, Miranda was left alone. And although everyone would say that this age was not a verdict, that she could still be happy, Miranda knew that was not going to happen. She had loved her husband all her life, and she would love him, even if he was no longer with her. Miranda sighed and put her hand on her neck. Yes, she calmed down. The pills are helping. Thank goodness. After a while, she will fall into a sound sleep, and no more nightmares will plague her. She'll be able to move on with her life without suffering so much. The pain will subside. It won't go away, but it will subside. Time will not cure, but it will allow her to get used to the pain, to come to terms with it. After a few minutes, Miranda's breathing calmed down. She began to fall asleep. After another couple of minutes, she was already asleep. Kevin sat at his father's desk, frowning, looking over some papers. He'd been sitting in his office for the last 2 months, trying to make sense of everything. Yeah, things were tight. Alone, it's hard for him to figure it all out. But Kevin had an enviable tenacity, and he thought he would get his way. No matter what it cost him, he could get his way. It might take many months, but it would happen. If he had tried to go into business before, his father would have tried to get into everything. And his father had offered him several times. He offered to teach his son everything so he could take his place. Only Kevin refused. He didn't want to go into business. He thought his father was too good at it. And why would Kevin want to get involved in this organized process? It would be unnecessary. Besides, Kevin didn't want to do it at all. He saw his future in something else. He dreamed of being a popular musician. He even set about starting his own band. Except his father's death turned everything upside down. And it was only for the sake of his mother. Kevin decided to give up his dream. Now he planned to get into his father's business, to take his place at the firm. He wanted to take over as director. But his mother had been telling him for weeks that he had to sell the firm. She didn't believe Kevin could even stay afloat. Miranda knew how hard it really was to run a business, and how Ethan had sometimes dropped his hands when competitors stole customers and investors from under their noses, and how hard it had been to hold their ground when they were being sued by ill-wishers. Ethan succeeded precisely because he'd been doing it all his life. And Kevin, he didn't know anything about the pitfalls. He didn't know all the nuances of running a business that Ethan never had time to tell him about. And Mother thought that Kevin would just bankrupt the firm in no time, and then they'd be left with nothing. You've got to understand, right now we can sell everything very profitably. I'm sure the competition will pay any amount we name. No one knows you can't manage, and they'll rush to take what's ours just to keep us out of their way. And no one has to know that we can't run the firm. If the competitors find out about this, it's all gone. There's no way they'll buy the firm from us for our price. They'll wait until we're completely broke. Then they'll take everything for nothing. And all my father's hard work will be for nothing. Is that what you want? Mother said, but Kevin hesitated until now. He didn't want to lose everything his father had worked so hard for. His father was very shrewd. And if he wanted to teach his son everything, he must have seen something in him that would allow him to run things as successfully as his father had. And Kevin still couldn't make up his mind. He kept putting it off and putting it off. But Miranda kept insisting. It was evening, and Kevin was still sitting in his office. His eyes were already beginning to hurt from the countless papers he was reviewing. and he didn't move forward, as if he wasn't just standing still, but backwards by a couple of steps. The door slammed. Kevin looked up. It was his mother. Just don't let her start that conversation again. He couldn't take it now. He was too tired. Miranda walked decisively to the table. She sat down in her chair and sighed. Kevin called me father's deputy. He advised us to decide quickly. We're just about to go bankrupt, and then it will be too late. We have to sell the firm in the next few days. She was saying something else, but Kevin barely listened to her. He knew this was the moment. He knew his mother was right. She was right now. If he didn't make a decision now, they could lose everything. And he couldn't let that happen, or he wouldn't be Ethan's son. Miranda continued to convince her son of the rightness of her decision, giving more and more arguments. He was silent, not interrupting her. That was a good sign. It meant that he was thinking seriously that she was right. Of course she was right. By selling the firm now, they would be left with a lot of money. They would benefit. But if they hesitated, there would be dire consequences. And then Kevin interrupted her out of surprise. She had even forgotten exactly what she was saying at the moment. No, Mother, I've made up my mind. I've made my final decision, Kevin said. Miranda was silent. She waited for an answer. I do not want to sell everything. I want to try to replace my father. I want to become a director. I want to continue his business. Miranda, out of surprise, didn't know what to say. Of course, Kevin had said before that he didn't want to sell anything, but now she knew from his tone that he meant it, and it was useless to talk him out of it, because she could hear the steel in his voice. But she tried to bring him to her senses anyway, the way she tried to bring her to her senses when she'd had these nightmares. Kevin, come to your senses. I understand that you sincerely want to protect your father's business, but it's not the best option. I'm sorry, but you can't run it. Dad spent years learning how to do that. You want to figure it out in a month or two. You can't, honey. And it's not because you're stupid or stupid at all. You're very smart and talented, but you can't do it now, and we can't wait years. We'll go bankrupt. Believe your mother, son. I don't want to, but we'll have to. Kevin listened to his mother again, listening patiently without interrupting. When she stopped talking, he sighed wearily. He put his palm on her hand and said quietly but firmly, I know that you are afraid. I understand everything. And I don't think I'm a great expert, but I believe I can do it in time. Mom, I can do it. Believe me, I'll do my best to make sure that we don't go bankrupt, but that we get rich. Mom, I believe I can do everything. Why don't you believe me? Let me do it, and you won't regret it. Daddy believed in me. I beg you, believe in me too. Miranda sighed doomfully. She recognized that tone and that determination, the same way her husband, Kevin's father, had been. Ethan had behaved exactly the same way, always listening, taking note, but always doing things his own way. Kevin wanted to try to be a principal. Why couldn't she resist it? If he wanted to try his hand at it, she couldn't force him to go any other way. Everyone went silent. Kevin looked at his mother, and she looked at the floor. Then she looked up, and Kevin saw that she had given up. All right, have it your way. If you want it, then try it. I hope you'll be right, and you'll do well. I sure hope so. Otherwise, we'll just be out of money. Son, Mother wasn't the only one who discouraged Kevin from taking over the firm. His friend James didn't believe in Kevin's success either. No, Kevin, you're just out of your mind. I don't believe you can run things. You only know how to play the guitar. You think you just snap your fingers and you can do anything. You're wrong, Kevin. It all takes skill and knowledge. You don't have enough of that in your arsenal. You better get serious about the band. Let your mom sell everything. You'll have the money to develop the band, and your mom will be well provided for. And now you're giving up your business to continue your father's business. I don't believe you're serious. James, I really want to try. I believe I can do it. I can feel it right now. But Kevin's girlfriend believed in him. She believed in everything he did. Molly was from a wealthy family, and her parents were the most wonderful parents a girl could have. They stayed out of her life when they found out she was dating a guy from a good and wealthy family, though they were lucky that Molly fell in love with him, and not some lowlife waiter or driver. After all, Molly had a pretty explosive and unpredictable temper. But when she started dating Kevin, they calmed down. And the parents, the girls were ready to carry the guy in their arms so that he could conquer their daughter. So Molly believed that no matter what Kevin did, he would do it in the best way. It wasn't just about music and creativity, but also about business. Honey, I believe in you. You're so smart, and you're gonna do great. Oh, how cool is that? Director of the firm, how cool does that sound? But seriously, Kevin, you know you have a lot of persistence. You can get anything you want, and that's a fact. And so Kevin shows up at the firm as the new director. He wasn't just Kevin anymore. He was the director of Kevin. Of course, all the employees had been warned in advance that a change was coming, and the whole department was buzzing for days before his first day of work. And after he left, the conversations didn't stop for a long time either. Sebastian, his father's deputy, was very surprised when Kevin reported his intention to take over the firm. He already had other plans. However, he was glad to be able to get rid of some of his unpleasant responsibilities. Sebastian was very cunning. He knew right away that Kevin was a total zero in business, and that he could take over a couple of things that only he had ever done. And it worked. Kevin really hoped that his father's deputy would help him get used to it, figure it out, get used to it, build up his relationship with the staff. And then it turned out he wasn't much help. Kevin immediately understood why his mother was talking about bankruptcy. Without his father, the firm simply froze in one position. The employees all came to work just to sit around and relax, and it was clear to a fool that without the right manager, things would go downhill. After a week of being at work all the time, trying in vain to figure things out and get things going, Kevin almost gave up. And then one day, one of the employees came into his office. Kevin didn't recognize her. He certainly hadn't seen her when he came here as director. And he tried to get to know everyone. This woman was young and very pretty. She was probably Kevin's age, maybe a year or two older. "Hello, Kevin. You have no idea how glad I am to see you. I was so terribly upset when Ethan died. I couldn't tell you how upset I was. And how happy was I when I heard about you replacing your father. I was so excited that I decided to take my leave prematurely. I still have a week left, but I'll get some rest later. I thought it would be better for me and for you," said the beautiful girl amiably. Kevin looked at her in amazement. She was so sure of herself, so cheerfully friendly, that he didn't realize right away that she hadn't even knocked, but had unceremoniously walked in. He just stared at her with his mouth ajar. "I don't think we've met. I don't know how that happened, but I guess I should do it now." The girl smiled radiantly and walked over to the table, but she didn't sit down in the chair. She walked right up to Kevin and held out her hand to him. He mechanically took it and shook it. Her hand was hot and pleasant to the touch. She shook his hand lightly and didn't let it go for a few seconds. This seemed very strange to Kevin. "Your name is Kevin." "That I know. And my name is Wendy. I worked with your father for several years. I was his right-hand man, so to speak. I was his assistant, and I helped him a lot. Without false modesty, I can say that Ethan trusted me with absolutely everything. And that's what you need right now. I can fill you in on everything. I can explain everything to you, tell you, show you, and even teach you how to give you all the passwords. I even know the code to his safe. Nobody knows it, but I do. You know that's the ultimate sign of trust. Not once have I ever let Ethan down. Not once. He could rely on me as if I were his own man. And I'm very proud of that. It's come to my attention that the firm is on the verge of collapse. Well, not bankrupt, but frozen. I don't like that word bankruptcy. I don't like it. I believe that smart people always find a way out of even the most difficult situation. And I think you're a very smart man, because you're Ethan's son. I came out of my vacation to help you. I am sure that with my help you will get up to speed quickly and get things back on track. And I will do everything in my power to make that happen as quickly as possible. How do you feel about my suggestion? Kevin was taken aback by this onslaught. This girl had a strange effect on him. He couldn't tell whether he was attracted to her because of her unusual beauty or her self-confidence. I'm ready to start working with you right away, he said, smiling. Wendy smiled and said, well, fine. Then let's begin. And from that day on, Wendy became his right hand. She was always by his side. She explained everything to him and told him how Ethan had acted in one situation or another. She wouldn't stop talking. And at first, Kevin didn't even know how to act. He stared at the beautiful helper at a loss for words, not knowing what she was talking about. From the outside, it seemed as if Wendy was talking to a mentally ill person. But after a while, Kevin got the hang of it and got used to Wendy's constant presence in his office, and he began to get to know his father's business little by little. He even started asking questions as he went along, making some notes in his notebook, and he even began to think differently. He didn't think of himself as a musician anymore. He was starting to turn into a real businessman, and Wendy did everything as she planned it. She wanted to stay needed and important under the new director, and she succeeded. She was Kevin's indispensable assistant, and she didn't forget that she was a woman. Every day she came to the principal's office in a new outfit, and all the outfits were spectacular and more suited for dates or dinner at a restaurant. She had so many clothes, no one knew. She came in something new every day, sometimes combining some items of clothing, and always her face was with perfect makeup. It was always pleasant. There was a smell of fragrance that was still in the air after she left, and always her hair was styled. Kevin remembered from the first time we met her that even her hands smelled just unbelievable. After one single handshake, his palms for hours more. They smelled of her perfume, even though he'd washed his hands several times to get rid of the delicious smell of Wendy, preventing him from concentrating. As much perfume as Kevin gave his girlfriend, she was constantly buying herself new fragrances. Never had she smelled so delightful, and never had her scent soaked into his skin, even though they hugged and kissed and made love. And here was just one handshake for a few seconds. It was kind of crazy. 2 months later, Kevin and Wendy were on the same page, and Kevin was used to her constant presence around him. But he found it almost as difficult to communicate with her. Not just communicating, but being around her. And that made him very uneasy, because he was afraid to even think about the real reason. It was something he had to think about and get rid of right away, no matter how hard it was. Wendy was madly attracted to him, and Kevin was aware that she was aware of the effect she was having on him. Probably this incredible attraction wouldn't have formed between them if Wendy had behaved differently from the beginning. But in the beginning, she gave visible and invisible signs of attention every day, which embarrassed, excited, and stirred Kevin's imagination. That she would touch his hand, then casually run a finger over his palm, and she looked innocent, then lean on his shoulder with her firm breast, and then pull up her skirt too high when she sits in a chair. And over time, these signs began to take on an intimate tone. She would hold her gaze for too long on his lips, and then she licked her plump lips. As she did so, her finger began to run down the cleavage between her breasts, or she wore such a bra that even through her blouse the outline of her breasts stood out. And she, often sighing as she looked at him, began to wrap her thin folder around him as if she were getting hot. Kevin remembered that he had a girlfriend, but he saw Molly so rarely that he was very pleased. Female company in the person of his delightful assistant. When Wendy first began to introduce Kevin to the business, the first thing she said was that most of the firm's problems were due to an old bookkeeper who should have been retired a long time ago. Her name was Slaga. I'm sure that old hag. She made a lot of mistakes in all her time on the job. But lately, Ethan has noticed some big mistakes in the paperwork, and those mistakes were caused by Slaga. Your father was going to fire that insufferable woman because she could have done worse, only he didn't get around to it. He passed away. And so this woman continues to work to this day. Of course, I can't force you to do anything against your will, but it was your father's will. So you know, if he was sure of something, it wasn't to be questioned. It's too bad Ethan couldn't see this through, Wendy said, looking thoughtfully at Kevin. It was as if Kevin saw a certain sneer in her gaze, as if she were sure he wouldn't fire the woman. And it had an effect on Kevin. He wanted to show that he was determined. He fired Slaga. To his surprise, the older woman wasn't even surprised. Kevin was embarrassed by the calmness with which she agreed to the firing. She only looked at him carefully, and that look seemed strange to Kevin. But he didn't dwell on it. He fired her. Slaga left, and Kevin went on to do important things. With his assistant, time went on. And soon Kevin realized that every night at home he wished the next day would come sooner. He longed to work with his assistant. She drew him to her like a magnet. He would fall asleep, and it seemed to him that her scent was all around him, even in his bed. One day they stayed late in the office to discuss an upcoming investor meeting. Wendy made an important point. Kevin wrote everything down so he could memorize certain phrases and talking points. He didn't want to lose face the first time he talked to investors as a new director. Wendy was telling him how to behave. No one had been in the office for a long time. Only the cleaning lady was probably wandering from office to office, from one room to another. Wendy and Kevin were terribly hungry. And when Kevin's stomach rumbled with hunger, they both laughed. "You know, if you don't mind, I'd like something to eat," Wendy said, smiling at Kevin. Kevin agreed to the offer. Wendy placed the order over the phone. 15 minutes later, the order was delivered to them. Wendy ordered coffee, ham and cheese sandwiches, and salads. They ate with gusto. Then they sat and talked for a long time. As Wendy was taking the tray of leftovers to the trash, she suddenly stumbled and cried out. Kevin immediately jumped up to her and picked her up. Wendy kept moaning in pain. It turned out she had twisted her leg. Kevin picked her up and carried her to the couch in the corner of the office. A few minutes later, Wendy was out of her shoes, and Kevin was massaging her foot. A few minutes later, they were kissing. That night, they became close. Kevin was thrilled. He couldn't have dreamed of anything like this. He had never felt as good with Molly as he did with Wendy. She had that name for a reason. She was a delightful lover. This incident that night was not. Wendy and Kevin became lovers in one fellowship. Naturally, they kept their relationship the secret. Wendy didn't want anyone in the office to know about their relationship, and Kevin continued to date Molly, though he didn't even understand why he did it every day. Kevin and Wendy arranged their love affairs in the office. At first, they stayed late after work. Then they got cocky and started locking themselves in the office in the middle of the day. This added spice to their relationship. The risk of exposure drove them both crazy. Time was running out. No one knew what was going on between the director and his assistant. Maybe a lot of people suspected their relationship, but there was no proof of it. So it all remained gossip. Kevin already thought he had become a full-fledged principal, just like his father. And Wendy confirmed it in every way possible. If he thought that at an important meeting he was unsure of himself and spoke out of turn, Wendy assured him that it was not so. And he believed her. How could he not? After all, they were close. And she couldn't lie to him. Why would she? But it didn't work out that way. And 6 months later, Kevin started to feel it. He had just broken up with Molly. The girl had tortured him to the bone with her accusations that he didn't spend any time with her, that he ignored her calls and didn't want to see her. He wouldn't even let her come to his office, which was especially weird for her. Finally, Kevin provoked a conflict, and he offered to break up on his own. He said a lot of hurtful words to Molly to hurt her as much as possible, and the girl just couldn't take it. But when she left, Kevin felt bad. For some reason, he thought he was making a big mistake, and he couldn't understand why he felt that way. But then he convinced himself that it was all for the best, that now he couldn't hide his relationship with Wendy, and now they could officially be a couple without fear of judgment. However, when he said all this to Wendy, she reacted negatively. "No, we're not going to admit that we're a couple, that you made that up, Kevin. I didn't sign up for this," she objected. Kevin was very surprised. "Well, wouldn't you like to be with me in public places? Go to restaurants with me, go to official meetings and parties?" "As my girlfriend," he asked. Wendy was kind of embarrassed, and then more gently she said, "Kevin, don't push me. I'm not ready to open up yet. Of course I'd like to, but it's better not to right now. We might be misunderstood. You just broke up with your fiancé. People might think that I jumped into your arms right away, that this is all I've been waiting for, and I don't want us to be judged. I want it to be gradual. We have to wait a few months, and then we'll talk it over again. And then we can start slowly. We can organize everything just slowly. But not right now, that's for sure. Listen to me. It's better this way. You will do as I ask, and I promise you that I will obey you, and I'll do whatever you want. My darling." "All right." Of course, when Wendy spoke to him so appealingly and pitifully at the same time, he could not refuse her, so he went along with her. They decided to keep their relationship a secret for now, and from that day on, things just got a little crazy. Kevin could feel it. First, one client disappeared, then another. They were just about to do something when a competitor beat them to it. Their idea becomes a competitor's idea. When Kevin tried to talk to Wendy about it, she told him, "Oh, Kevin, you're making this up. You think the competition is ahead of us. It's all just a figment of your imagination. Then how do you explain the fact that our potential client is now their client? It can't just be a coincidence." That's how Kevin got angry. When he got angry, Wendy put a stop to it. She'd turn it into a joke, and then she'd start kissing him and tempting him into intimacy. And in her arms, Kevin was oblivious to the whole world. And so it was until the next time, until the next conversation. But a few more weeks passed, and his deputy, who until then had no interest at all in the firm and in success, came to Kevin with a serious conversation. Sebastian brought him some documents to review and sign, and he said to Kevin, "Kevin, I think it's time to take some action. Wendy has told me many times that you have everything under control and that I shouldn't bother you with unnecessary talk. But I was beginning to doubt her word. We're starting to sync, and you're still not responding." Kevin frowned. Yes, he sensed that, but he kept believing he was wrong. Things weren't going as well as he thought they would, and that was his biggest disappointment. Kevin realized that if it continued like this for a few more months, they would go broke. And no matter what steps they took, it would only make things worse. Something strange was going on, but Kevin couldn't figure out what it was. "I react in short order," he answered. Sebastian was quiet, waiting for him to continue. But Kevin looked over the documents in silence, and then nervously signed his name. And then Sebastian cleared his throat and cautiously asked, "Let me ask you, how do you react? I am, after all, your deputy. Don't you think I should be aware of the steps you are taking?" Kevin put down his pen with a sigh and looked at his deputy. How he wished he could grab him now and shove him out of his office. But he couldn't, for that would have looked more than a little strange. "Why should I have to tell you everything?" he answered. Sebastian blinked a few times before answering. "Well, maybe we can fix the situation together. I assure you that we're doing just fine with everything together with Wendy. She helps me enough, and I don't need any help." "Thank you, Sebastian," Kevin frowned. "With all due respect to you and your ways of working, I'd like to say that Wendy isn't exactly helping you. I don't know what makes you so sure of her, but maybe she doesn't realize the seriousness of the situation either. Judging from the last report." "What report?" "You know, the monthly report. She took it to you to sign, and then she brought it back to you." Kevin frowned. "I don't know what you mean. You'll have to explain." "How could I?" Didn't Wendy give you bulletins? How did you sign them then? Sebastian asked with surprise. Kevin felt alarmed. He wanted to yell at the deputy to explain what he was talking about, but he restrained himself. If he acted carefully, he might find out more. Yes, the rundown. That's right. I've been working too hard. She's already brought me the last one. Kevin pretended to know everything. She picked it up just today. I guess she didn't have time to bring it to you. She's away on business, so maybe you could make a copy and bring it to me, Kevin asked. Sure, Kevin. I'll have it done in a couple of minutes. In a few minutes, the last report was already in front of Kevin on the table, and when Kevin saw the latest figures, he was horrified. He didn't think things were that bad. Everything seemed so awful, like it had only gotten worse since his leadership began. Kevin kept the report for himself, and when Wendy arrived, she brought him a bunch of documents to sign. Kevin watched her closely. She distracted him in every way she could with her caresses and kisses. But when Kevin saw the summary, he turned Wendy's attention to her. Kevin, all this is nothing. Things will get better, I'm sure. These are all interim results. I'm sure that luck will soon be on our side. It's all sad, of course, but I'm sure we'll get through it. We just have to be patient. You trust me. I'm good at this. I know we're gonna make it through this fight. And Kevin believed her. But then he called his deputy, and he asked him to make him copies of all the summaries for the last few months. And when everyone in the office dispersed that day, Kevin got busy going through all the documents, and he was horrified again. When he had studied all the papers, he put them in front of him and said quietly, "What a mess. What do we do now?" Kevin was no fool, and at this point his brain was working clearly and distinctly. After studying all the papers, Kevin clearly pictured in front of him the picture of everything that was going on around him. They were really going under, and all the data from the economists and the accounting department showed it. In fact, they had been sinking ever since he came to the firm. Only the appearance was that they were doing well, and Kevin was so busy working with Wendy that he wasn't even paying attention. He was concentrating on the work that was on the surface, completely oblivious to the other areas that needed to be fixed. And then he was too busy with his relationship with Wendy and completely forgot about everything. Kevin suddenly realized that none of this was an accident, that such accidents were not random, and if their rivals, whom his father had fought for so many years and almost always prevailed against, had now rushed forward, leaving them behind the entire planet. And it couldn't have been just a fluke. Now, after a few months, Kevin could say with near certainty that it certainly wasn't his fault. He was doing his father's job pretty well, and he was already starting to think like an entrepreneur. But it wasn't helping. They're going under. And there's a whole other thing going on here. How? How do they know everything? Kevin whispered, frowning and looking at the papers. It so happens that their main competitor for many years under his father's leadership was almost always one step behind them. But for the last 2 months, he has been 10 steps ahead of them. It was as if the director of that firm knew their every move. And Kevin realized that that couldn't just happen. Somebody is setting them up, drowning them along with the firm and all their employees, and that someone is working for them. The realization came in an instant. And then Kevin thought about his deputy, and could he be that person? And what's possible, he seemed to Kevin from the very beginning to be some kind of shady character. Why then didn't he bring the reports to him personally, but sent Wendy to bring them to him? If he had brought them personally, he would have emphasized them, and Kevin would have realized they were in big trouble. And he was sending Wendy, who probably didn't understand anything about them. Kevin thought about all of this, and with each passing minute he became convinced that he couldn't do without help. But who was Wendy to ask for help? No, he couldn't solve these problems with a woman. She could bring him up to speed, but she would not be able to solve the problems that should be solved by the director. The deputy was the one Kevin suspected of causing all the trouble. What if it was somebody else? If there are other people working here who are working on 2 fronts, could it be? Of course it could. And Kevin had no idea. What would he do next? How would he know who the two-faced person might be who decided to help a competitor, to sink them? You need someone who knows all of this, who knows everything thoroughly. Someone who has been working for a long time. A reliable person you can count on and trust. And then it hit Kevin. What if this person was the old bookkeeper that he had fired when he took over as director? What if she could help him? What if he asked her? Maybe she knows something he doesn't, but he should. But then Kevin remembered the words of his assistant, Wendy, confidently telling him that the old woman was no longer thinking straight. Kevin was inclined to think that was true. Why else would Slaga be acting like that? She hadn't reacted in any way to her sudden dismissal. Her calmness even then made him suspicious, and he thought his decision to get rid of her was the right one. But what if it wasn't? What if her confidence came from the fact that she knew something? Kevin pondered for a long time, analyzing Slaga's behavior, and he came to the conclusion that he should go to her anyway. If she had worked so long with his father, then she was a good employee. And if his father was going to fire her, then Kevin was going to find out why it was so personally from the senior accountant. And he really hoped that Slaga hadn't completely dumbed down. Maybe she wouldn't remember who he was anymore. But he really hoped that wouldn't happen. Kevin rummaged through his laptop and then found the address and phone number. The former accountant's. He looked at the time. It was already 9 o'clock in the evening. He hoped she would pick up the phone. He sighed, doubting his decision. But then, glancing at the papers on the table, he decided to act. He dialed the number and held the cell phone to his ear. No one answered for a long time. Kevin dialed the number again. Again, there was no answer. When he called a third time, no longer hoping that he would get an answer, Slaga answered after the first ring. No, what nerve. But if the person does not pick up, if 2 times you have not received an answer, is not it clear that you do not get it? Why do you call at 9 p.m.? What kind of a problem is it to bother an elderly person at 9 o'clock at night? Yes, I'm still awake, of course, but that doesn't mean I'm willing to go to bed at night and deal with whatever it is you're worried about. What do you want? Who is this? The cellular phone. From the bank fraudsters offer credit at 9 o'clock at night. Would you like me to show you how bad things can get? You'll always learn it's better not to call me at this hour. Otherwise, it'll be worse for you. I hope this conversation is being recorded. Kevin was taken aback by the endless stream of words. He thought he'd lost his mind, and Wendy was right. He'd better not call her at all. She wouldn't know who it was, and she wouldn't remember him. There was silence, while Kevin pondered whether to hang up silently or just apologize or tell her who it was. Slaga spoke out and fell silent. Then a sigh was heard, and Slaga said quietly, "I'm good at it. In just a few months. Now I can tell anybody off over the phone. That's usually how it works. Unwanted strangers are eliminated right after my tirade. Well, if it was one of the people I listed, would you have hung up on me by now? So I'm willing to listen to you quietly. Who is it? You're going to tell me your name. And what do you want?" Kevin finally came to his senses and said quietly, "Good evening, Slaga. I am Kevin. Kevin, Ethan's son. You probably don't remember me, do you? We've only seen each other once. I'm sorry to bother you." Kevin was silent, not knowing what to say. Slaga was silent for a long time too, and then she said quietly, "I can't forget you, because I've seen you not just once, but quite a few times. Your father used to show me pictures of you all the time. I even heard you play the guitar. Interesting, very interesting. I told Ethan right away that you would go far." Kevin raised an eyebrow in surprise. His father was talking about him to that old accountant. They communicated so intimately. It's very strange. You don't say anything, so you didn't know anything. Dad didn't tell you anything. Well, if you're calling me and not saying anything, then you're in trouble. And if I'm not your mother, then you're not a personal problem. You want to solve work problems. That's what I'm saying. There are problems at the firm, and a big one, judging by the fact that you thought of me. Kevin was even more surprised that this woman was sane. Apparently, she knew right away that he was in trouble, so he had come to the right place. Yes, we have a problem. Or rather, I have a problem. And I've got some suspicions, and I'd like to talk to you, but not over the phone. If you don't mind, I wonder if we could meet tomorrow to talk. I hope I won't keep you long. I just need to find out something, ask you a few questions. Kevin answered. Yeah, I figured as much. Yeah, we can get together, and I'm afraid you're gonna hold me up, you know. I don't have anywhere to be in a hurry. It's you young people who need to rush. What's my rush to the afterlife? I'm going there anyway. What's my hurry? Kevin sighed with relief. He was worried that Slaga wouldn't want to talk to him after he'd fired her without even warning. If you don't mind, maybe tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, or make an appointment yourself. But I'd like to see and talk to you as soon as possible. It is very important to me. Slaga smirked in a way that could be heard even through her cell phone. That it's that bad? Then what are you waiting for? I can see you now, if you want. I won't be asleep for a while. So we can talk tonight. You said you were resting. Confused, Kevin said. And why does he act like that when he talks to her? Like he's a messed up schoolboy who got caught by the principal doing something shameful or illegal. Kevin laughed. You must realize I wasn't trying to get you off. I don't even go to bed before 12 o'clock at night, and I usually stay up late, you know. That's good. Come over right now, I'm waiting. 20 minutes later, Kevin was already at Slaga's house. She greeted him somewhat aloof, not smiling or showing any emotion. This puzzled him slightly. Come in, she said briefly. She led Kevin into the kitchen. I don't have any coffee. I don't drink it. It just makes my blood pressure spike. But I've got tea, whatever you want. I'll make you some soothing tea. I'm sure it won't bother you, she said. She was flapping around the kitchen table. Kevin watched the older woman. She didn't look as stupid as Wendy had told him. And her hands weren't shaking. And she spoke calmly, intelligently, without stammering. She was in perfect health, and Kevin felt ashamed that he'd fired her. And why hadn't he checked to see if she was really screwing up at work? He couldn't answer that question. Finally, Slaga got everything ready. She poured flavored tea for Kevin and sat down in her chair. She looked at Kevin, squinting. The boy was ashamed to look into her eyes, but he held her gaze. So, tell me what happened. Things are bad at the firm, right? Yeah, it's bad, Kevin answered. Slaga hummed. Well, it's understandable. It's coming to a logical end. What do you mean by that? Well, you have to answer some questions for me first. But tell the truth, or my story is useless. If you're here, do as I say. Otherwise, you won't know anything. Do you have anything to tell me? You will answer my questions. With a challenge, answered Kevin. He did not like the older woman talking to him like that, but he restrained himself. If he started to show his temper, she would just send him away. But Slaga already knew that he didn't like what she said. You, Kevin, better do as I say. I understand. You're an important director now, and all that, but you don't have to do that to me. You are no longer my boss, and I didn't promise to obey you and grovel to you. Can I be honest with you? I have a lot to tell you. Kevin was silent. Slaga stared at him for a while. Then she sighed and asked, Wendy still works at the firm. Kevin wondered why she was asking about the assistant, but nodded. Sebastian is still a deputy. Kevin nodded again. What does Wendy do? What position? She was my father's assistant. Now she's my assistant. And how close do you two get along? Kevin didn't understand the question. He tried to answer as calmly as possible. She helped my father with everything. Now she's helping me with her help. I'm totally immersed in everything. She helped me get comfortable with everything. I am very grateful to her for that. She has been an invaluable help to me. My father trusted her. I think she didn't disappoint me for nothing. Slaga laughed a little. At these words, Kevin was beginning to get annoyed. He did not understand why this elderly woman was asking him all these questions. He had come to find out what she knew, and she interrogated him. He didn't like it very much. I don't know if you know what I mean, or if you're just pretending. I'm going to ask you one more question. How close are you to Wendy? And it's not about work issues. Kevin felt himself blushing. He tried to hide it, so he said right away, I don't see what that has to do with anything. Kevin, we're going to have to say goodbye now. If you don't answer my question, honestly, calmly said Slaga. She said, it is calmly, but her eyes were so strict that Kevin was even frightened. Only now did he realize how intelligent and shrewd the elderly accountant was. On top of that, she also had a sharp tongue, and she could easily put anyone at ease. For a second, Kevin regretted coming to see her, but then he realized that Slaga had not set up this interrogation for nothing. Apparently, she knows something. If Kevin didn't tell her the truth now, she might hide something from him too. He'd better tell her what's really going on. We're close. We're seeing each other, but nobody knows about it. We haven't told anybody yet, but it's only a matter of time. I'm serious about her. Clara sighed and closed her eyes. They were both silent for a few minutes. Then Slaga opened her eyes, looked at Kevin, and shook her head slightly. And you fell into her trap, she said regretfully. What does that mean? Kevin asked anxiously. Slaga sighed once more and answered that vile creature was your father's mistress. And now she's decided to take you under her thumb too. Kevin turned pale. He couldn't imagine hearing such a thing. How could she be his father's mistress? Yes, she was half his age, and there was no way his father could have gotten involved with Wendy. His father loved his mother. He was faithful to her until the day he died. Family meant a lot to his father. He could never cheat on Mom. He would never do that to her. And Wendy wouldn't cheat on Kevin. She was just his father's best assistant and nothing more. If something like that had happened, he would have been told about it by someone at the firm, and the same Sebastian would have known. He would have warned Kevin in advance if Wendy posed any danger to him. No, Wendy couldn't have been Dad's mistress. They were just in close contact, dealing with work matters. She was just too often. Around him was privy to all his business. Apparently, a lot of people were annoyed and offended by that. So they made up these gossips to smear the innocent girl's reputation. That's most likely what happened. And Kevin will never believe those rumors. Slaga, if you're thinking of telling me the gossip you heard when you were working in the office, I have no intention of listening to it. I thought I was learning something important, but I'm afraid I had false hopes. And what can you tell me? You were just an accountant. She frowned. Well, if so, you can get up and leave now. But you won't know all the things I wanted to tell you. What's on your conscience? You've already been unreasonable once when you fired me. If I had stayed at the firm, I would have taken action in time. I would have opened your eyes. You kicked me out without even explaining why you did it. I accepted my fate. I didn't tell you anything. You're your father's son. I thought you were clever. I was sure that you would understand the situation on your own, that you would understand who was who. But unfortunately, you never did. You've been brainwashed. And now you believe the person who deceives not only you, but everyone around you. And you're ready to keep believing her, to go out of business. And just because I said bad things about your mistress. What then? Are you a fool? Kevin wanted to get up and leave, but stopped just in time. Something in Slaga's tone alerted him, and he realized that the woman would never pass on gossip or rumors to him. Apparently, she knew what she was talking about. If she said Wendy was his father's mistress, he'd have to find out the whole story, and then he'd leave. Okay, excuse me. Tell me everything. I am listening to you, he answered. Slaga told everything she knew, and from what she had now learned Kevin. The hair on his head moved as if he'd been struck on the head with a club. Slaga had been working with Ethan for a long time. They were on great terms, and the accountant had been working for a very long time, and she had many acquaintances in many different places. She had very important connections, and she was very helpful to Ethan. Yes, her position wasn't the most important at the firm, but she did more than just bookkeeping duties. Ethan often consulted with her. She helped him with a lot of issues related to competitors and investors. Slaga had her own people at the competitors. They were people who owed her something. Yes, they worked for the competitors, but they always helped Slaga if she asked for help, and if she needed to know something, no one ever hid the truth from her. You could tell that these people worked for two parties, but Slaga never gave up her sources. No one would ever find out who these people were who helped her. Ethan cherished his accountant very much. He trusted her 100%. He knew she would never betray him. She thought everyone knew about her principal. It seemed to her that he wasn't hiding anything from her, but she only thought so. After a while, Slaga found out what she needed to know. She found out the one thing Ethan was hiding from her. Slaga learned that Ethan and his assistant Wendy were lovers. She found out purely by accident. It was Friday night. Slaga remembered that she had to take one file of papers home from work. She wanted to work on the weekend. The woman was very upset that her memory had failed her, but she decided not to waste her time. She returned to the office in the evening to retrieve that folder. The security guard on the first floor said the office hadn't closed yet. The director was still there. He had some important business to attend to. Who was she to tell that Wendy was working for a competitor? Deputy Ethan was an unreliable man. He could not be trusted. He would only spread gossip all over the office, and it would all reach the competitors. It would ruin their firm. Slaga decided to keep quiet. Then Kevin came in, and Slaga decided that she would have to tell the dead director's son, except that while she was trying to find the right time, Kevin fired her. And the woman decided to tell him nothing. Even if she told him everything, he still would not have believed her. Slaga was sure that if Kevin could figure it all out, he would come to her himself. And so he did. Not quite like that, of course, but still, Kevin came to her to find answers to his questions. To say that Kevin was shocked was nothing to say. Of course he believed Clara. She couldn't have made up the whole story. And besides, lately Wendy had been making him kind of suspicious. Why did she want to hide their relationship? Why didn't she want anyone to know about them? And why was she hiding the reports from him? After all, she knew for sure the firm was going under. So that's what she wanted. The competitors wanted to bankrupt them, and then they would buy their firm for next to nothing and become all-powerful. But what pissed Kevin off the most was that he believed Wendy. He succumbed to her charms, and that thing turned out to be a con artist. She drove his father crazy too. He just couldn't resist her. Maybe this girl put something in their drinks, maybe something else. But Kevin was inclined to think that this girl was using some other method. Kevin always couldn't figure out why her scent had that effect on him. She must have used some kind of scent that stupefied his brain and attracted him to her. She lured him in. He could think of nothing else. And not only when she was near him, but when she was far away from him. It seemed to him that her scent enveloped him constantly. That must have been it. She used some kind of scent. She touched him all the time, and he was all in her scent afterwards. Why aren't you talking? You don't want to say anything. Careful, Slaga asked. Kevin looked at the older woman. What can I say? This girl ruined us. She ruined my father's business. She ruined me. Because of her, I broke up with the girl who loved me, and I trusted her. God, how could I have been so stupid? What came over me? Slaga shook her head slightly. She beckoned all the men around her, beckoning them to her. I don't know how she did it, but you know, I'm more than sure that every lover of hers thought she was the only one. You thought she was crazy about you too, but that's just an act. I'm sure Benjamin, your competitor, doesn't know she's your lover either. I'm told he's crazy about her, and he just sent her away because he trusts her. And this vile creature is just looking to benefit herself. She's trying to find the best place for herself, trying to get a better job, except she's not going to succeed, and she's sure of it. And then there's Kevin. You don't have to say she ruined you. I'm glad you came to your senses, and things can still be fixed. We just have to get rid of that vile creature who infiltrated our office. They talked some more for a while. Slaga was a very smart woman. She gave Kevin more valuable advice than he had received in all of his time in charge. When was Kevin's advice given by Wendy? Everything was written down. Because of the girl's presence, he was afraid it would slip his mind. It was only now that Kevin felt he was free of her spell, and now he was sure of himself. He remembered every word Clara had said, and he knew. He believed he could make things right. The first thing Kevin did was to dismiss Wendy. He told her everything he thought of her. When the girl found out that Kevin was in the loop, she changed dramatically. Her face was so pitiful. She started sobbing and saying that she was sorry and that it wasn't her fault. "Kevin, dear, you have been misled. I haven't been doing this for a long time. I love you. I gave it all up. I don't denounce anybody else. I'm not to blame for all the firm's problems. I didn't tell anybody anything. Yes, indeed, they tried to take me, tried to make me snitch on you. But I fell in love with you, and I didn't want to do that. I don't know who said all that about me, but it's not true. Somebody's trying to set me up. Somebody found out that we love each other, and they want to break us up. They want you to blame everything on me. But I'm sure someone else is working for the competition here. I'm just being set up." Well, Kevin didn't believe her, and he said that there was someone who would confirm that she was still snitching on Benjamin about everything that was going on at the firm. And Kevin also told her that he knew that Wendy was Benjamin's mistress. As soon as Wendy heard this, her face immediately became angry and unpleasant. Kevin was even horrified how he could love this girl, how he could think he loved her. She was just some kind of witch. She must have bewitched him. And he had not seen her true nature. How could he not have realized it at first? Will you regret firing me? I know so much about you. You're going to die anyway. Your firm is already at the bottom. It's just a matter of time. There's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can fix. It's already done. What about you? I never loved you. You disgusted me. I was just playing you. I'm satisfied. Now you know the truth. And anyway, you can't fire me because I'm leaving. I did my job. I'm free now." Wendy left, and Kevin started trying to fix the situation at the firm. The first thing he did was to ask Slaga to come back, but she refused. "Kevin, understand. I'm old for this kind of work, but you're such a valuable employee. My father trusted you, and I trust you. If you need more pay, just say the word. I'll pay you as much as you say. Please come back. I really need you. I really need your advice too. I can't do it without you," begged her Kevin. But Slaga only smiled fondly. "Kevin, you are deeply mistaken, and you will manage. You are the son of Ethan, a fine man, intelligent, determined, and fair. And you can do it, honey. You can do it without my help. You've got good people working at your firm. You just have to get through to them. They will all help you. Now you're free from the spell of that nasty thing that's been bossing you around. Now you have to take care of your people. You have to give them hope that everything will be all right. And I'll help you without going back to work. You can call me at any time. Ask me for advice. I'll always talk to you, help you. But I don't want to go back to work. I'm really good at retirement, even though I was afraid of it. But it's pretty good here. I need peace and quiet now." Kevin. He got over the fact that Slaga didn't want to come back. He pulled himself together and began to fix things. Oddly enough, Clara was right. Kevin really was a good manager. Everyone, of course, was surprised that Wendy had disappeared. They didn't understand what happened between the principal and the girl, but they were glad that the director had changed. Now he was constantly having meetings where he invited the department heads, and he got close to Sebastian. His father's deputy was a competent man, but a little lazy. But Kevin had a way with him. And together they tried to make things work at the firm. But Kevin understood that as long as the competitor knew too much about them, he would have the advantage. So Kevin decided to make a mess of things at their firm. And he decided to start small. Even though Wendy was Benjamin's mistress, He still had a young wife who was unaware of her husband's amusement. Kevin decided to talk to this girl and tell her that Benjamin was cheating on her. Benjamin's wife's name was Nancy. She was a beautiful girl. She was half her husband's age. She was the same age as Wendy. And what was the husband missing when he swapped his wife for that vile creature who couldn't be trusted? When Nancy found out her husband had a mistress, she raised such a scandal that soon many people in town found out about it. After Wendy left Kevin, she came to her lover's firm. She was now his assistant. Nancy belittled Wendy in front of the whole office, and then she told her husband that she was filing for divorce and was going to split the property in half. And then Kevin took the next step. He sent Benjamin an anonymous letter with pictures of Wendy and himself attached. He told in great detail that Wendy was a mistress to Kevin of his rival's son. He gave many details of their intimate encounters and even described moles in intimate places. When Benjamin found out that his lover was more than just his lover, he became enraged. He sent her there to find out all the information she needed. And Wendy went to bed not only with Ethan, but also with his son. Then he, too, kicked Wendy out in shame. Wendy disappeared from town, and with her she took Benjamin's good fortune. After his wife left and Wendy disappeared, he began to have problems. Things at the firm got worse and worse. Then one employee after another began to quit. They never liked the angry, abusive director, but he paid good wages. And as soon as the delays in payments started, everyone ran, leaving the firm and Benjamin to their fate. As time went on, Benjamin tried to come to his senses and get things going, but he was having no luck. He hired new employees, but they were all clueless and uneducated. There was a rumor going around town that the firm was going bankrupt soon, and no good people were coming to Benjamin. So Benjamin began to drink himself intoxicated. He started to drink a shot every night, but soon he didn't have enough of the bottle. And after a couple of months, he went bankrupt. He was left all alone. There was no one near him. Everyone had abandoned him. No family, no friends, no helpers, no one. And there was darkness ahead. And Kevin's business was booming. Once he got rid of Wendy, he came to his senses. He saw clearly in front of him a further plan of action, and he followed it. Ethan believed in his son for a reason. When he was alive, Kevin really was able to become a good businessman, and he soon got it right. As soon as his main competitor went under, Kevin was back at the helm, and every day his success got bigger and bigger. Kevin also started trying to make peace with his ex-girlfriend. He had hurt her very badly, and he knew that Molly wouldn't even want to see him. He just wanted to apologize to her. Oddly enough, she agreed to meet with him. He came to her house that night, and they talked for a long time. Or rather, Kevin talked, and Molly listened. Kevin told her everything that had happened. He didn't keep anything from her, and he apologized for being so mean to her. He was very surprised when Molly forgave him, and she offered to stay friends with him. Kevin agreed, but after a while they both realized that there was no way they could be friends. The attraction for each other was too great, and Kevin realized that he had never really fallen out of love with his ex-girlfriend. It was just that Wendy came between them, who had bewitched Kevin in some unbelievable way. A month later, Kevin and Molly realized they couldn't live without each other, and they got married. And Miranda didn't know the half of everything that had happened in recent months. She didn't know about Wendy. She didn't know why Kevin and Molly had broken up. The woman was just glad when things got better, and she was happy that her son was able to carry on her husband's business. Now she didn't have to worry about him.